Family, let me tell you something today. There comes a time in every one of our lives when God looks us right in the eye and says, "It's time to let go." And I know that's not easy to hear. Because we love to hold on. We hold on to people, to memories, to habits, to comfort zones, to things that once felt safe. But sometimes what feels safe is the very thing strangling the life out of us. Now here's the truth: God will never ask you to release something unless He's got something greater on the other side. But the problem is, we don't see the other side yet. We're standing at the edge with trembling hands, holding tight, afraid that if we let go, we'll fall. But God says, if you let go, I'll carry you. If you release it, I'll replace it. If you trust me, I'll transform it. See, too many of us are stuck in yesterday, while God is trying to move us into tomorrow. Too many of us are clutching dead things, old wounds, expired seasons, while God is saying, "I've got resurrection life waiting for you." And if we're not careful, we'll spend our lives clinging to what He already said is over, missing what He's trying to make new. So today, I want you to lean in, because this isn't just another sermon. This is a word for somebody's destiny. If you've been wrestling with what to release, if you've been scared to step out of what's familiar, if you've been asking God, why does it hurt so much to let go, then this message is for you. Don't you tune out, don't you get distracted, because when God says let go, He's not trying to break you, He's trying to bless you. When God tells us to let go, He's not trying to punish us. He's not trying to strip us of joy or rob us of something we need. He's trying to free us from what's been holding us back. Because the truth is, all of us, at some point, grab onto things that God never intended for us to hold onto forever. Sometimes it's a relationship that once gave us comfort, but now it's draining the life out of us. Sometimes it's a habit we thought would ease the pain, but now it's become a chain. Sometimes it's our own pride, our own way of doing things that feels good in the moment, but keeps us from moving forward. And God, in His love, looks at us and says, "That's enough. It's time to let it go." The problem is we get comfortable holding on. We convince ourselves that as long as we have this person, this thing, this situation, we'll be okay. But God knows that what we're holding onto is too small for the destiny He has prepared. He knows that if we keep our fists closed around what's familiar, we'll never have hands open to receive what's new. You can't grasp the future if your fingers are still wrapped around the past. And yet, how many of us are walking through life with clenched fists, holding on to things that have already expired in the eyes of God? Think about the children of Israel when God brought them out of Egypt. They had been delivered from slavery, but they couldn't let go of Egypt in their hearts. God was trying to move them into the promised land, but their mouths kept talking about going back. They said, "We remember the onions, we remember the leeks, we remember the food we had back in Egypt." But they forgot that with that food came chains. They forgot that with those onions came the whip of a taskmaster's hand. And that's what happens when you don't let go. You start romanticizing the very thing that was destroying you. You start longing for the very place that kept you bound. You can't step into Canaan if you keep looking back at Egypt. See, letting go is not just about leaving something behind. It's about trusting God with what's ahead. He doesn't tell you to let go so you'll be empty. He tells you to let go so he can fill you. But if you insist on carrying yesterday's baggage, you won't have the strength to carry today's blessings. Some of us have been weighed down, dragging old seasons, dragging old pain, dragging old disappointments, and we wonder why we're too tired to run the race set before us. It's because we won't release what he already told us to drop. And I know it's not easy, because sometimes what you're holding onto isn't bad. It just isn't for this season. Abraham loved Ishmael, but God had to remind him that Ishmael wasn't the promise. Sometimes you're holding onto something that feels dear to you, but it's not tied to your destiny. And until you release it, you'll never fully step into the promise God spoke over your life. Letting go is painful because it feels like loss. But you've got to shift your perspective. Letting go in God's kingdom is not loss, it's preparation. It's preparation for the next level, preparation for the next blessing, preparation for the next assignment. You cannot carry the new wine in old wineskins. You cannot walk into tomorrow with yesterday's mindset. If God is calling you to let go, it's because what you're holding on to is too small for what he's about to do. Think of it like a child who won't release a broken toy. The parent is standing there with something brand new, but the child refuses to let go of what's broken. That's how many of us look before God. We cry, Lord, bless me, Lord, increase me, Lord, use me. But our hands are still gripping what's shattered. And God is saying, child, I can't give you what I've got for you until you open your hand. So the question you have to ask yourself today is simple. What are you holding onto that God told you to release? Is it bitterness that poisons your spirit every time you think of it? Is it fear that keeps you from stepping out in faith? Is it a relationship that keeps pulling you back into compromise? Or maybe it's just your comfort zone, the place where you feel safe but stagnant. Whatever it is, when God says let go, he's not taking something from you, he's making room for something greater. You've been praying for breakthrough, but breakthrough can't come until release comes first. You've been asking for healing, but healing can't flow until you release the wound. You've been asking for joy, but joy can't rise until you let go of sorrow. You've been asking for peace, but peace can't settle until you release the chaos. The release is the doorway to the blessing. So hear me today. When God says let go, don't fight him, don't resist him, don't argue with him. Trust him, because what he has for you is always greater than what he's asking you to release. Letting go requires something deeper than our logic. It requires trust, because most of the time when God tells us to release something, it doesn't make sense in the moment. It doesn't add up. It doesn't feel reasonable. We look at it with human eyes and say, Lord, how could I possibly let this go? This is all I've known. This is what I've depended on. This is what has carried me this far. But God sees the bigger picture. He sees the end from the beginning. He sees what we cannot see. And so while we're caught up in what doesn't make sense, he's working out what makes destiny. That's the tension of faith. Faith is not built on what you understand. It's built on who you trust. If you've got to figure it all out before you obey, then you're not walking by faith, you're walking by sight. And God never called us to walk by sight. He called us to walk by faith, which means that sometimes you'll have to let go without having the answers. You'll have to trust him when the path is foggy. You'll have to lean on His word when your feelings are screaming the opposite. Look at Abraham. God told him, leave your country, your relatives, your father's house, and go to the land that I will show you. He didn't give him a map. He didn't hand him a blueprint. He didn't even tell him where the land was. He just said, go. And Abraham had a choice: stay where it's familiar, or step into the unknown with nothing but a word from God. If Abraham had waited to understand, he would have stayed stuck. But because he trusted, even without understanding, he became the father of many nations. That's the same challenge we face. God may be telling you, let go of that relationship. And you say, but Lord, what if I end up alone? He may be saying, let go of that job. And you say, but Lord, how will I pay the bills? He may be saying, let go of that plan you made for your life. And you say, but Lord, what if it all falls apart? See, we want God to show us the whole picture before we move. But He says, no, trust me with the first step, and I'll show you the next one. That's trust. That's faith. The problem with many of us is that we want control. We want to know how it's going to turn out before we take action. But trust doesn't work like that. Trust says, God, even when I don't understand, I still believe you're good. Even when it doesn't add up, I still believe you're faithful. Even when it feels like I'm walking blind, I still believe you see me and you know where you're taking me. That's not easy, but that's where the power is. Sometimes God allows confusion to test our trust. He allows silence to test our faith. He allows delay to test our obedience. Because if you only obey when it makes sense, that's not obedience. That's agreement. Obedience is when you move even when it makes no sense. Obedience is when you let go even when everything in you wants to hold on. Obedience is when you say, not my will, but your will be done. Do you remember Peter on the water? Jesus told him, step out of the boat. Now, human logic says water cannot hold you. Human understanding says if you step out, you're going to sink. But Peter chose trust over understanding. And for a few glorious moments, he walked on what should have drowned him. That's what trust can do. It can turn impossibility into possibility. It can make you stand where you should have fallen. It can carry you where you should have been crushed. But notice when Peter shifted from trust back to human reasoning, when he started looking at the waves instead of the word, he began to sink. And that's a word for us. When you let go in obedience, you've got to keep your eyes on the one who called you, not the storm around you. If you let go, but then keep analyzing, keep overthinking, keep doubting, you'll sink in the very place you could have stood. God is not asking you to understand the how. He's asking you to believe in the who. He's not requiring you to figure out the plan. He's requiring you to trust the planner. And if he told you to let go, then he has already seen what's next. He has already prepared the next chapter. He has already written the next blessing. And the only thing standing between you and that blessing is your willingness to release and trust. So if you're wrestling right now, if you're struggling to release something because it doesn't make sense, I want you to remember this. You don't have to understand everything to obey God. You just have to trust Him enough to let go. One of the most dangerous things we can do is hold on to what God already told us to release, because when we cling to what's over, we delay the blessing He's trying to send. We block the flow of His favor, not because He isn't willing to give, but because our hands are too full to receive. You see, obedience opens the door for breakthrough, but disobedience keeps us stuck in circles. And the longer we hold on, the longer we wander. Think about Israel in the wilderness. God had already promised them a land flowing with milk and honey. It was theirs. He had prepared it. He had gone before them. But their disobedience, their refusal to let go of fear, their refusal to let go of unbelief, caused them to walk in circles for 40 years. 40 years of delay, not because God wasn't ready, but because they weren't willing to trust Him enough to release what He said was holding them back. And many of us are experiencing the same thing, walking around the same mountain of frustration, the same valley of disappointment, the same cycle of struggle, because we're still holding on to something God told us to drop. When you cling to what God has ended, it will drain you, it will exhaust you, it will wear you out, because anything outside of His will has no power to sustain you. That's why some of you feel tired all the time, not just in your body, but in your soul. You're drained because you're pouring energy into what God already said was finished. And here's the truth: you can't resurrect what God has already declared dead. You can't force life into something that no longer carries His breath. Lot's wife is the perfect example. God sent angels to deliver Lot and his family out of Sodom. He told them, "Don't look back." But what did she do? She looked back, longing for what God had told her to leave, and she turned into a pillar of salt. She missed her future because she couldn't release her past. And that's the danger. You can literally get stuck in yesterday and miss what God has for your tomorrow. So let me ask you, how much longer are you going to keep holding on to that dead thing? How much longer are you going to clutch that bitterness, that unforgiveness, that toxic relationship, that failed plan? Don't you know that as long as you keep your arms wrapped around what's killing you, you won't have the capacity to embrace what God is trying to heal you with? Don't you know that as long as you cling to Egypt, you'll never fully enter Canaan? We say we want blessing. We say we want increase. We say we want more of God's presence. But many of us don't realize blessing requires space. God can't pour into a vessel that's already full of junk. He can't fill a heart that's still occupied with idols. He can't expand your life if you're too busy holding on to what He already asked you to surrender. And the enemy knows this, so he tries to keep us clinging. He whispers, "Don't let go, you need this, you'll never make it without this, what if God doesn't come through?" And the more we listen to that lie, the more we delay what God has already prepared. There's a story in the New Testament about the rich young ruler. He came to Jesus asking about eternal life. And Jesus told him, "Sell everything you have, give it to the poor, and follow me." The Bible says the man walked away sad because he had great possessions. He couldn't let go. And what he didn't realize was that in holding on to his wealth, he was missing out on the wealth of heaven. He was clinging to temporary treasure and forfeiting eternal reward. That's what happens when we hold on. We settle for less than what God has promised. It's like trying to climb a mountain with bags of bricks strapped to your back. You'll never reach the top because the weight is holding you down. And some of you, God has been whispering, "Drop the bags, drop the weight, let it go." But you keep carrying it, and that's why you're exhausted. That's why you can't move forward. That's why you're still stuck. But the moment you lay it down, the moment you release it, that's when you'll feel the freedom to rise higher. Obedience may be costly, but disobedience is far more expensive. Delayed obedience is still disobedience. And the price of disobedience is delay, frustration, and missed opportunity. Don't let what you refuse to release keep you wandering in circles. Don't let stubbornness cost you your promise. Don't let fear keep you tied to something God already broke off of you. Because the truth is, every day you hold on, you're postponing your own breakthrough. Every day you refuse to let go, you're putting off the very blessing you've been praying for. And when you finally release it, you'll realize the blessing was waiting on the other side the whole time. So don't let holding on delay what God has already set in motion. Let it go so you can step into the blessing He's been waiting to pour into your life. When God tells you to let go, it may feel like loss, but in His kingdom, it's never just loss, it's an exchange. Whatever you release, He replaces. Whatever you surrender, He restores. Whatever you put in His hands, He multiplies. You may not see it at first, you may not feel it right away, but God never asks you to give something up without already having something greater prepared. That's why His word says He will restore the years the locusts have eaten. That's why He declares that your latter days will be greater than your former. That's why He promises beauty for ashes, joy for mourning, and a garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. But here's the struggle. When you're in the middle of letting go, all you can see is the empty space. All you can feel is the pain of release. All you can hear is the silence of what's no longer there. And it's in that moment the enemy whispers, "See, God left you. See, God failed you. See, you gave up everything and you've got nothing to show for it." But that's a lie. Because God always replaces what He removes and He always restores what you surrender. The problem is, His timing doesn't always match our impatience. Look at Job. Job lost everything: his wealth, his health, his children. If the story ended in chapter 2, we'd say God was cruel. But if you keep reading, by the end, God restored Job double for his trouble, twice as much as he had before. Twice as much blessing, twice as much favor, twice as much increase. And that's what you've got to understand. God's endings are never really endings. They're setups for a greater beginning. Think about Joseph, betrayed by his brothers, thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, locked in a prison. At every stage it looked like loss. At every stage it looked like defeat. But in every stage God was setting the stage. Because the same brothers who betrayed him were the ones who had to bow before him. The same pit that looked like destruction was the doorway to his destiny. And Joseph could look back and say, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." That's restoration. That's what happens when you let go of bitterness, let go of revenge, and trust God to work it out. And maybe that's what God is trying to tell you today. Maybe you feel like too much has been lost, too much time has been wasted, too much has been taken from you. But the God you serve is a restorer. He doesn't just replace what you lost, He redeems it. He multiplies it. He transforms it until it works for your good. The years you cried, the nights you prayed, the pain you carried, none of it is wasted. He bottles every tear. He hears every groan. And when He restores in a way that makes you forget the pain of the release. Do you remember Hannah? She wept bitterly because she couldn't have children. She prayed, she pleaded, she begged God to open her womb. And when God finally answered, He didn't just give her a son. He gave her Samuel, one of the greatest prophets of Israel. She thought she was just asking for a child, but God gave her a legacy. That's how restoration works. It exceeds what you thought you were losing. And maybe right now you feel like God is asking too much of you. Maybe it feels unfair that He's calling you to release what's so precious, what's so familiar. But I want you to know this. What He has for you is always greater than what He's asking you to let go. If He takes the branch, it's because He's preparing the fruit. If He prunes the vine, it's because He's getting ready for abundance. If He allows something to fall away, it's only to make room for overflow. You may think, but it hurts too much to let go. Yes, it hurts, but healing always follows hurt in the kingdom of God. Resurrection always follows crucifixion. Glory always follows suffering. God doesn't leave you empty. He fills, He restores, He makes all things new, and when He gives back, it's pressed down, shaken together, and running over. So don't let the pain of release blind you to the promise of restoration. Don't let the silence of the in-between convince you that God forgot you. Don't let the enemy's whispers keep you holding on to what God already replaced in heaven's plan. Because when you finally surrender, when you finally let go, that's when you make space for God to show you that what He gives back will always be greater than what you lost.